we have a system of government in which we have no hands to define and design, and we continue with it even when we know that it is not working for us. Those who brought it to us are now questioning the rightness of their invention, its deliverability, and its relevance today without before. The essence of any system of government is the welfare and the well-being of the people, all the people. Here, we must interrogate performance of democracy in the West where it originated from.
Well, all right, this is not the first time former President Obasanjo is calling for us to interrogate this form of a democracy that was introduced to us by the West. Well, in the same vein, though, Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi is towing the same line at a media parley in Abuja. Obi stated that democracy is not universal and that Nigeria must adopt the type of democracy that suits its society. He also reiterated that he is not desperate to be the president of Nigeria, but is desperate to see Nigeria work.
Democracy, as is being practiced in the Western world, does not have universal acceptability and applicability. You have to look at what suits you. For example, if you look at democracy in America, where we even copied this presidential system of government, there's so many things that we've abandoned. If today you're president of America, you can't just, I've never heard in America that they bought vehicles for legislators. You can't just buy cars anyhow. I have never heard you can't buy cars for first lady anyhow. There's no, in fact in America there's no office called Office of First Lady. It exists in name. So these are issues. So we must look at what suits us. Again, look at how we can manage our own expense and everything. So what Obasanjo is saying that we must not adopt this and even adopt it wrongly as we are doing it today.
Yes, we must question the performance of democracy. I mean, Peter Obi right there hit the nail on the head. I mean, we've been talking about this, budget proposal, allocation, and the type of democracy that is practiced in the West. And it's so different. And he also talked about the fact that, okay, if the president even wants to, have a meal, he will not be using taxpayers' money, as we have seen recently in all of these budgets that have been allocated. They'll use their own money to fund a dinner. So I think it is important that they've said that we should try to adopt the democracy that would fit our society. Dr. Abati.
Okay, this is an old argument.
Yes.
Once upon a time, we used to talk in Nigeria, some people used to talk about what they call homegrown democracy.
Homegrown democracy.
Homegrown democracy. President Obasanjo yesterday used the phrase Afro-democracy.
Yeah.
And what he was saying basically is that we didn't design this liberal, Western liberal style democracy. And since we had no input into the design, the context, it looks like it's something that we don't understand. Well, the issue here, I like to quote Farid Zakaria.
One of my favorite
He's
journalists.
a columnist, television presenter, but he has a PhD from Oxford.
Yes.
He's also very prolific. He wrote a book called The Future of Freedom, a Liberal Democracy at Home and Abroad. What he did is to flip the coin, to interrogate the idea of democracy as, a catalyst for stability in societies, if not liberty. And he checked from South Korea to America, and he found that, look, democracy, yes, in terms of form, is there, but in terms of the practice, it takes different forms. Democracy in South Korea, he argues, developed from liberalizing autocracy. And so you have different patterns. The kind of democracy they have in China is not the kind of democracy that they have in Russia. It's not the kind of democracy that they have in the UK. So we have seen different patterns, and he tries to give us those examples. But where is the answer? I think the answer is provided in another set of books by another scholar, Ruchi Sharma, who is the author of Breakout Nations. I think it's a 2012 book. And then he also wrote The Rise and Fall of Nations, looking at different countries, the kind of patterns of development, emerging markets, how they develop. What did he find? That leadership is very critical. Leadership, the kind of priorities that leaders set. Here in Nigeria, if you like, call it a Nigerian democracy, if you like, call it whatever. What we lack in terms of practice are the values at the center of the democratic ideal itself. And what are those values? Checks and balances. Mr. Peter Obi was referring to checks and balances. That when he was saying in the US, you can't just go and take public funds to go and buy fanciful car for yourself. Because the system will not allow it.
Absolutely
because
not.
Institutions are in place.
Yes.
What is democracy about? The right to choose. Freedom of choice. Competition. Mass participation. President Obasanjo said, well, liberal democracy allows a place where a few people will just hijack government and then the majority will be left out of it, and then the opinion of the minority will dominate. If that minority is an enlightened minority, if they have a sense of the common good, then of course they will be able to carry the majority along. So I think many of our countries in Africa have failed because we don't have the institutions, we don't have the values, we don't even respect the ideal of democracy. What we are practicing truly is not democracy.
Yes.
So the option, what is the option? President Obasanjo is saying we should look inwards to look at patterns within our traditions that we can use. Well, maybe those original things are there, but President Obasanjo is also an intellectual, and he has been in this business of throwing up issues for public conversation since he left government the first time when he set up the Africa Leadership Forum. Now, he's doing this under the auspices of the Africa Progress Forum, where a number of political leaders and scholars met in Abeokuta, and they are throwing up ideas. So the conversation is healthy.
Yes.
But I think leadership is key, values very important. Unless we get those values right.
Yeah.
I
love that. Leadership is key. Obasanjo is saying that we should look inward and outward and see how we can adopt another form of government that can suit us. Rufai.
So speaking of former President Olusegun Obasanjo Baba, with due respect, when you say leadership is key, Dr. Apati, Baba is a firm indication of why reasons like democracy have not worked in Nigeria.
How so?
He tried to look for a third term, which was against the democratic tenets. I tried to tweak the constitution. He prevailed over very flawed elections.
He denied that. He said he had no hand in that gambit.
Anyway, he prevailed over very flawed elections that the president that came in, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, confirmed to us that the elections that brought me were flawed with irregularities. It was in his era we had the 24 million mark elections, where presidential candidates will always get 23 or 24 million mark elections. One of the worst elections in Nigeria's history was under him. Let's call it spade a spade. You know how terrible that elections were in 2007? Let me tell you how terrible it is. The Supreme Court's ruling ended 4-3. 4 in favor of, 3 against the elections. 3 judges out of the 7 judges said the elections should be cancelled. We don't talk about that judgment enough. 4 in favor. I'm not sure Supreme Court presidential rule did that neck and neck in a while. So that's why a lot of people have been saying, with due respect, President Obasanjo does not have the gravitas to be able to say this.
No, not gravitas.
I mean,
maybe you mean moral right.
The moral right, to be able to say this. Because in his own time, what did he do? And I come back to your point, Dr. Abati. It's all about leadership. You see, all of this we are saying democracy has not worked and all of that is incumbent on who becomes the leader. So let me now quote a book for you, Audrey. A certain writer and thinker, Francis Fukuyama, was too hasty in 1992 when he wrote the book, The End of History. Because he saw that once the wall had fallen, if there was an acceptance of liberal democracy around the world, then that was going to start the end of the human evolution. But he saw that he was proven wrong because the outlier were the position of the leaders. See what America had under Trump and the likes.
Right.
So he now wrote another revised edition recently, itemizing the fact that it is also leadership, that tutelar head that makes it. If Nigeria want to change today, if the president is ready, Nigeria will change. So the reason why I'm saying it's not working is because we don't have disciplined leaders.
That's it.
And they should all take the blame when necessary.